for being here for the debut of my new bad boy comedy act. I will never forget you guys. So what this show is about is this. Do you ever feel like you didn't live your life, you just happened to be there at the time? I often feel like my life is like a shitty version of that Talking Head song we were just listening to once in a lifetime. But instead of walking around going, this is not my beautiful house, this is not my beautiful car, this is not my beautiful wife, I'm walking around going, this is not my shitty flat, these are not my angry housemates, these are not my shitty fucking Tinder matches, that was not my tub of ice cream, maybe they are my angry flatmates. I think what happened to me is like, I'm 30, I don't feel like I've committed any of my life into long-term memory, right? Like, I was meeting with some friends and talking about coming over to London, and they started talking about their three most important, proudest memories. And my friend slash arch rival in life, Kevin, started that chat. Because that is such a fucking Kevin chat. Like, he doesn't do things, he achieves them, and that pisses me off. So Kevin's talking about his three proudest moments, and he's like, oh, the time I got made the youngest junior vice president of my accounting firm, the day I met my beautiful fiancée, and the time I bungee jumped off the Sahara Desert. Or I don't know, I wasn't listening to fucking Kevin, okay? But everyone's going around in the circle and giving their three things, and I couldn't remember anything, and I'm starting to panic, because once it got to me, the only three things I could think of were the three nicest pizzas that I've had. And I'm a fucking vegetarian. They're all margaritas. It's the most forgettable kind of pizza. It's not okay. I do think the reason I don't remember anything is just because I've never had to actually choose or commit to anything in my life. It's all kind of just happened to me or for me. I've kind of just bumbled through on life on babyface good looks, which I've now fucked up, charm and white male privilege alone. White male privilege, the breakfast of champions. And I feel like figuring out that my life has been easy is a difficult thing to take, because my whole life I've been somebody who wanted equality in the world, and now I've realised if that ever happens, I'm fucked. So now when I go to rallies, I have to be like, what do we want? Equality! When do we want it? When I'm old enough to not personally feel the repercussions! I don't know, guys. Like, I think our generation was fucked by choice. I do. Because I think we are in the Goldilocks zone of being fucked, right? Because the baby boomers weren't told they were going to get anything, and then they got everything, right? And then Generation X were told they were going to get everything, and then they got most of it. And then our generation, we were told we'd get everything again, and then halfway through they were like, they had a meeting or something that we weren't invited to, and they're like, hey guys, I just want to let you know, there's no more, you're going to want to put down your avocado on toast. There are no more opportunities in the world. Like, enjoy that avocado on toast, because that is as good as it gets for you. I think we should stop telling kids they can be whatever they want in the world. That is such an unfair trick. And we all have to live with the consequences of that, right? Now we live in a world where there are not enough nurses and not enough teachers, but there are way too many DJs with too much self-belief. Worse than that, Instagram influencers? Yuck! I don't know if you guys know what an what an Instagram influencer is, but essentially it's somebody who posts a photo on Instagram with a brand in the photo, and then they get paid for it. They are free-range fucking models. And I wish we would call it that, because one of my friends the other day told me he wanted to be an Instagram influencer, and I don't have the vocabulary to tell him he doesn't have what it takes, because man's not hot. And I don't know how to have this conversation with him, and I'm like, dude, I don't know if it's for you. And he goes, Anthony, I need to be an Instagram influencer. It's what I want to do with my life. I just love taking photos of things. And I was like, oh dude, that sucks. If only there was another way to turn your love of photography into a career. Have you thought about photography? I don't know. I realise as well, like, when we're thinking about generations, I realise I'm super jealous of my parents' generation, because they got to have a midlife crisis. And it's in the language, right? Midlife crisis implies you're only having one of them. That means you get to live your whole life like, I'm fine! And then you get somewhere in the middle and you have a bad month and you're like, maybe I'm not fine. But then you get to the end of it and you're like, I'm fine again! Our generation, we don't have that luxury. We don't call it that anymore. We call it existential crisis. And as far as I can tell, you can have one of them every 40 minutes. And the experience of a midlife crisis and an existential crisis is very different, right? Because a midlife crisis has a perfect hero's narrative. You meet a character, you fall in love with them, they doubt themselves, they buy a Porsche, they fuck somebody half their age, and then they come out of it with a newfound love of who they were in the beginning, right? That's beautiful. But like I had my first existential crisis at 16, that's a very different experience. Like, I can't afford a Porsche. I definitely can't fuck somebody half my age. It's not fair, I don't know. Gotta not say that line because it implies I want to and I don't. Noted. Good. I don't know. I think I was going through all of this and it really bothered me because I do remember the first time I had an existential crisis, I was 16 and we were choosing our subjects for uni and subjects for VCE, which is your A-levels, and I was just like, well, what if I choose the wrong courses? If I choose the wrong courses, I get into the wrong degree. If I get into the wrong degree, I don't get the right job. If I don't get the right job, I'm not good at that job. If I'm not good at that job, I get fired. If I get fired, I end up homeless. And if I end up homeless, I'll never get a blowjob. 16, my priorities were whack. But so, it was really bothering me, and I after that party, about a couple of weeks later, I was driving home to my parents' house where I still lived. And, I mean, funny for you, painful for others, okay? And I was driving home, and I got home, and my mum was like, oh, Anthony, you've got mail. And I was just like, which fucking idiot is getting married now? Because that is the only time you get letters nowadays, when one of your friends decides to take the 2 to 5 year break we call marriage. And I was like, I hope it's fucking Kevin. I can lose Kevin. He's been a dick ever since he got his promotion. Fuck off, Kevin. And so I got to the letter, right? And writing looked so much like mine. And I was like, fucking typical Kevin. Handwriting like mine, but a little bit nicer, just like the rest of his fucking life. And I was looking at it, and then I realised this wasn't Kevin's handwriting. This was my handwriting. But it was my handwriting from when I was 14. Now, when I was 14, what my high school had done is they made me write a letter back to myself. And then 10 years after I graduated, when I was 28, they sent that back to my parents' address, right? And I didn't know how to feel about this. I guess I felt angry at first because they had assumed that I'd still be living with my parents at 28. And they were fucking right. What a dick move. Like, hey, you're never going to afford a house, but remember when you didn't know that? And so I was anxious and I was eager and I unwrapped the letter, right? And it said this. Dear Anthony, very formal introduction to a letter to myself. I don't know what to write in this. I don't know what you'll want to know. Or is it me? Indecisive even then. I'll try not to waste too much of your time. So here are the 3 things that I think are important in life. 1, it's important to do a job that helps people in the world. 2, you're not religious and you don't do drugs, but you think it's important to respect people's choices. And 3, love is the best thing we do in the world. Love you. Don't awe me! He wasn't wise at 14. I know that because I was him, okay? Like, that little kid that wrote that fucking letter is the exact same reason Limp Bizkit was ever a thing. Limp Bizkit, a band who famously sang, "It's just one of those days where you don't want to wake up, everything is fucked, everybody sucks." And wise 14-year-old me decided to write those lyrics on the back. Wise 14-year-old, go fuck yourself. Like, at 14, I wrote that love is the best thing we do in the world. But I know for a fact that I thought the second best thing was fingering. I wasn't wise, I wasn't. I think that the best indication of the fact that like, because people say kids are wise, right? Kids are smart. But when I was a kid, not 14, but when I was younger, the way they taught us about sex ed and consent and what Grant just went through was to make us watch a video called Kids Can Say No. And it started with a song that goes, "My body's nobody's body but mine. You run your own body, let me run mine." I don't quite have the pipes of Grant, but you get the picture. And I remember when I watched that video, it fully changed my life. Because I went home that night, I was mucking around doing what I was going to do, and then my parents were like, "Anthony, it's bedtime," and I was like, "My body's nobody's body." Right, so that's how it starts, and then they have a narrator/presenter, and he sits down with a group of children, and he explains them that people can touch them in a way that gives them a yes feeling, and a way that gives them a no feeling. Which is weird as it is, but what is weirder is that presenter was Ralph Harris! And that gives me a no feeling, Rolf! It does exist, you Google it, it comes up, it's proper fucked. Wise young kids knew nothing about that. Like it's you get older and you learn from experience, right? But at the same time, I remember getting this letter, and it properly threw me because I never thought I was doing anything wrong. I thought I was living a great life, and then I've got this letter from me as a kid telling me that I should have been doing something different and something more. And I mean, let's start with 1, right? It's important to do a job that does good in the world. Now, I know what I meant when I was 14. At 14, I thought it was important to do a job that helped people across or down in society and never up. I thought I wanted to do something that probably helped people, like being a teacher, or a nurse, or a comedian in a sex dungeon. Yeah, why not? But then when I was 14 and we first had to get our jobs back home, like, because that's when you can get your first job, I remember everybody else went to get a job at McDonald's or KFC or Pizza Hut because it's fast food and it's easy. The Holy Trinity, really, in the name of the Hut and the Colonel and the Holy Clown. Amen. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to work around adults because I thought they could teach me how to be a more grown person. I wanted to work with real adults doing their real job in the world. And so what I did was get a job at a warehouse. And on my first day, I remember being so excited and nobody really talked to me. I was really nervous. And I sat down at lunch alone and nobody had spoken to me. And then eventually this guy named Greg, who was clearly the alpha of the warehouse, come over and he said, "You're a young fella, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yes, teach me." I didn't say it out loud, but I did think it. And he was like, "You're a young fella, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Well then, you know what all the good porno sites are, what for whacking off to." And that broke my heart. That properly broke my little heart. And not because I wasn't going to get the wisdom that I had hoped for from Greg. The main thing that upset me about that is at that time of my life, I didn't realise I was going to need to do that for the rest of my life. Like, I thought it was like training wheels on a bike. Like, you learn like that and eventually you get to do it with other people and you never have to do that again. And now fucking Greg is telling me that I have to do that forever. And so Greg did teach me something, right? What Greg taught me, he taught me in the way of a metaphor, nay, a parable. What Greg taught me was this: the wanking never ends. But the joy does. Fucking Greg, I was too young to learn that. But so I worked at the warehouse from when I was 14 to when I was about 20, because I worked there throughout my time at uni. At uni I studied psychology, and then at 20 I actually had my worst fears realised. I realised I don't have the ability to emotionally compartmentalise to be a psychologist. Like, I couldn't do that. And so I had ended up in the wrong course. So I wasn't going to get the right job. And so I might end up homeless. Which would mean I would not get another blowjob, because at 20 I got a blowjob. I'm a rag! Go me. Look at us. But so I realised that, and I remember I was talking to fucking Kevin at the time, and my whole life I had thought that what I would do is work at the warehouse, go to uni, and then start my real job where I did good in the world, right? And Kevin was like, "Hey, I've got a job going where I work, and that might be really helpful to you." And the job that Kevin got me, my real job, was in advertising. Now, people often tell you what a shit line of work advertising is. I don't know if you know the old Bill Hicks joke, but a lot of friends will often yell it back to me. The old Bill Hicks joke goes like this. It goes, "Working in advertising is like sucking the devil's dick." And I'm here to tell you it is nothing like that, you guys. Because if you've ever been a junior at an advertising agency or anywhere, you will know that they don't trust you nearly enough to let you do anything as important as suck the devil's dick. Like, you're like the ugliest member of the devil's orgy at best. Like, you walk in and they're all doing sexy shit and you're like, "How can I help? How can I help?" And they're like, "Shut up and work the balls, pleb." So that's what I was doing with my life. I did social media branding, Now, our two biggest clients were a teenage fashion brand and a tool brand. Now, doing social media for a teenage fashion brand is exactly what you expect. Like, you spend your whole days searching for the dankest memes you can find, right? And then you post it to the brand's Facebook page, and the kids are like, oh my god, it's a photo of Rihanna with the angry wrestling bitch face and a smiling face and the words, my two moods. These guys get me. I'll have 10 of whatever they're selling. And my job is done, right? But the problem is it was never that easy, because the brand I worked for considered themselves to be an aspirational teenage fashion brand, which would mean I would send them a list of dank memes, and then every week they would send back a list where they thought the girls in the photo weren't sexy enough. Oh god, he's right. So that meant that it was my job that I was doing to pay the bills. Well, I wasn't paying bills, I was living at my parents' house, we digress. It was my job to Google image search sexy teen girls. Oh, that's fucking disgusting. If you ever want to play Russian roulette with an anxiety problem, may I suggest Google image searching sexy teen girls in a fucking open plan office. No walls to protect me from the horror of the internet. And the weird thing is, like, work happens to a schedule, right? So it was always the same things on the same days for the same clients. And back home we have data retention laws, so there were definitely federal agents somewhere in Canberra just getting messages every Friday being like, he's at it again! That weird guy in Cremorne, he's at it again! I don't know what it is with him, but every Friday morning, but only on Friday morning, it's the exact same Google searches. First it's the sexy teen girls, then it's the men with power tools. And then how do I stop crying at my desk? The strange thing is, right, is like that part of the job bothered me so much that I didn't realise how bad the other half of that job is, because the other half of doing social media for a teenage fashion brand is replying to all of the messages we got. And as an aspirational teenage fashion brand, we got one message, but we got it 20 times a day, and it was just girls who were really excited about what they'd bought, showing us themselves in what they bought. So it's just like, oh my god, love my new shorts, babe, XO, XO, XO forever. And they didn't realise they were sending that to me! So now I have to reply like I am one of them? I was like an anthropologist trapped deep in the white girl Congo. I was telling this joke recently, right, and I had the weirdest bit of feedback I've ever got after a set. A guy came up to me and he shook my hand and he was like, mate, I thought that was really funny. Mate, I thought that was funny. Started well. I thought that was funny, but what I thought was weird is that you spent so long on stage talking about how you're worried that the guys at work might think you're a bit of a creepy sex pest. You don't need to worry about that, mate. I'm here to tell you, you of all people, don't need to worry about that. Because most people will just assume that when they look at you. Fuck that guy, but on the same hand, new joke for the show. It wasn't Kevin. It is Kevin for the rest of the time I do this show. But it was weird. Like, I got this letter telling me that I should be doing more with my life and I should be trying to help people. But at the same time, I never felt bad about it, you know? And And I thought about whether or not 14-year-old me was right, and I decided he kind of was, but no, he wasn't right. Like, you should try and help people, but at 14, he wouldn't have known that you could get paid for Googling hot chicks, and if he did, his answer probably would have been different. The difference being, like, at 14, I remember I was into MILF porn, and at 28, I was searching sexy teen girls. So I have the Benjamin Button of Google histories. Alright. Number two on the letter bothered me as well. Number two on the letter. In fact, number two on the letter. Number one, I didn't know how I felt. But number two, I was actually offended. You do not do drugs and you are not religious. You don't know me, you fucking idiot. I had done drugs, and not only was I taking drugs at the time, I was taking them as a religious experience. My drug of choice was the magical mushrooms, right? And I did them as like a meditation thing. And at the time that I got this letter, I was once a month eating like a bag of 5 to 7 grams of magic mushrooms. Now, because I lived at home with my parents, I couldn't take them there. Like, they're a very volatile subject. Your mood is very important. I can't be tripping balls and then just have my mum come and be like, Anthony, what are you doing in there? I've given myself mild food poisoning on the hope of finding enlightenment. What? I've eaten magic mushrooms. Anthony, I've made vegetable lasagna. You're going to ruin your appetite. And so what I did to avoid that is once a month, I would book 5-star hotel rooms with the express intention of eating a big old bag of magic mushrooms. I told you at the start I had a lot of white male privilege. Like, that is the full stop. And the thing is, like, so because I was going to hotels a lot, I learned this, right? If you look like you're not going to piss off the expensive clientele and you're only staying for one night, they'll often upgrade you because they don't want to waste a cheap room on a one-night booking. So what I would do is I would arrive to hotels in my best suit, big bag in the pocket, and the concierge would be like, Mr. Jeannot, we're happy to inform you that you've been upgraded for your stay, and you are now on the second highest floor of our hotel. And I would have to fight every instinct in me to not be like, it's gonna be the highest soon, motherfucker! But like I said, I was doing it like as a meditation thing. I wanted to learn, I wanted to be enlightened. And I think I did get that from the experience. And I think the best way to demonstrate that is to play a little game I call, was it magic mushrooms or was it meditation? Now the way this works is I will say a thing, you tell me if I thought it when I was tripping balls or whether I was deep in an enlightened state, right? So, thought the first. Anthony, you have a slight hero complex and you always think it's your job to solve everything. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just stay out of the way and let people who know better do their job. Meditation, magic mushrooms. Meditation. You're all fucking wrong, that was magic mushrooms. Do you know what, I'll make the second one easier for you. So let's see if you can figure out what this one is. Our personalities are kind of like tiny mosaics of tiny little mirrors. And as we go through life, we see things, and sometimes if we see things enough, they get stuck, or sometimes it just makes a big enough impact that it gets stuck. And the things that get stuck on our mosaic of mirrors act like Instagram filters on everything we see in the rest of life. And that is all that identity really is. Mushrooms. Of course that was magic mushrooms. There's only ever been one person say meditation, and I'm pretty sure he was fucking high. And the last one, The last one is this. You can't spend your whole life waiting for things to get good. Sometimes you have to accept that this is your life and either do something to change it or accept it and enjoy it for what it is. That was a trick question. I thought of that taking a shit. Some people will say meditation and fair play. But I felt so properly judged by the fact that he had decided for me that I wouldn't do those two things before he'd ever fucking experienced them. And so to have all of this rejection coming from your past self, I was like, well, no, you know what? It is nice to do a job that's good in the world, great, but at the same time, one day we're going to have a midlife crisis and we want to afford a Porsche, okay? 2, I don't do drugs and I'm not religious. I'm the shaman of shiitake right now, motherfucker. And 3, love is the best thing we do in the world. Love is not the best thing we do in the world. Love is something cowards do so that they don't have to be... Oh, I wish I could rip that down. Oh, fucking no. Love is the best thing we do in the world. No, like, I had such a problem with that. Everything I knew about love at 14 had fucked me up for the rest of my life. Like, at 14, there were 2 role models that I had for love. One was Disney films, right? You should not learn love from Disney films. Disney films teach you that there is no chasm, no problem that is too big that love can't overcome them, right? And that is fucked. And I learned that when twice. My first girlfriend, I had taken her to my favourite restaurant. We'd been dating for about 6 months at the time. And my favourite restaurant was a Pakistani restaurant. And the waitress come over, she was wearing quite a nice turquoise hijab. And I said to my girlfriend at the time, like, oh, isn't that colour nice? Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it nice? And she said, well, if you think she's so pretty, why don't you just fuck her then? Red flags were missed. I mean, it was first relationship. We got home and I was reading a book and she went to the shower and then she come out of the shower, right? And she was wearing a towel. And then she removed her towel. And she wrapped it around her head. And then she said, now do I look pretty like that curry bitch? Oh. And that was fucking difficult to hear. Mainly at that time, because she did look pretty. And so like a big part of me, most of my mosaic of mirrors were like, Anthony, you need to break up with her. But then a smaller part of me was like, yeah, but you can do that tomorrow. And so tomorrow I did break up with her. And then the next girlfriend I hadn't learned that lesson either. Like, but I had to learn it the hard way, because what happened was we'd been on a series of about 12 dates over the course of about 8 weeks. And then she sent me a message that said, hey Anthony, come over to my house on Saturday. I have a secret special surprise for you. And I thought, that sounds like anal, so I'm excited. And then we get to the house, right, and she's got a car packed for an excursion. I'm like, this is a weird way to do it, but you're the boss. And we start driving, right, and we get like an hour and a half out of my home city towards the local wine region, and then she dropped a glass and glassed me with it. No, she didn't. We're an hour and a half past the local wine region, towards the local wine region. I'm like, oh, she remembered that I love wine. She's taking me to the wineries. This is going to be awesome. And then we drove past. Then we went about a half hour further towards the local wildlife sanctuary. I was like, oh my God, she's taking me to the wildlife sanctuary. She knows I love animals. This is going to be awesome. Then we drove past. And then we drove an hour and a half past every fucking reference point that I can give you. And I was like, oh no, she's gonna kill me. This isn't awesome. We get to this national park, right? And there are these bollards to stop her driving, like people driving. And she's a maverick, and she drives around down a dirt track that I can only assume she created for herself. Not the dirt path I was hoping to see that afternoon. She drives 15 minutes down this fucking path, and then she stops the car, and she pulls up the handbrake, and then she opens the glove box. And she pulls out a blindfold. And I'm like, woo, we're back on kicky sex shit, I'm on board! No, at this point I'm going through all of our dates looking for red flags. Like, the fact that Wolf Creek is her favourite movie, no good. The fact that she's obsessed with true crime dramas, no good. The fact that I once saw her eat a scone dry, no jam, no cream. Psychopath! And I think she's watching me, and I think for the first time in this whole experience, she realises the way that this would have looked for me. Because she puts her arm on my thigh and she goes, oh my God, Anthony, I'm so sorry. This is not at all what it looks like. I'm a doomsday prepper? And her secret special surprise was to show me the survivalist hut she's prepared for the end of the world? Hot tip, guys, not romantic. She goes, do you want to see it? I was like, fuck me, when am I going to get this chance? Let's go. And we start walking, and it's like another 15 minutes, and it becomes perfectly obvious that the blindfold was redundant. I was never finding this. And we get to this wooden hut-like shack thing that I don't know if she's built for herself or found and claimed squatters' rights on. But I remember looking at this thing and thinking, I only have two choices right now. One of them is to break up with her, because this is fucking mental. Or the other one is to marry her, because this is the closest someone my generation gets to owning property. I don't want no more letters coming back to my parents' house, you guys. So we're there, and we're looking around the hut, and it had everything you needed for the end of the world, by the way. It had like blankets and cushions and tin food and baseball bats and knives. But the thing that kept catching my attention, right, the only thing I could focus on, is the fact that every can of tin in the hut was home brand. Like, she's preparing for the end of the world, but fuck me, she's gonna do it on a budget, you guys. Stupid. And the whole time, like, I was so aware of how watched I was being. Like, I was so conscious of the fact that she was taking everything in. And eventually she stopped me and she said, Anthony, this isn't going at all the way I expected. It's like, mate, how did you expect any of this to go? And she said, I thought you'd be excited at first. And then I thought you'd be surprised at first. I fucked up the joke anyway. I thought you'd be surprised at first, and then you'd be excited. And then I thought that we could, you know, anal, no. She didn't think we were gonna, but she did think we were gonna fuck in the hut. And I had to tell her that we weren't going to. And it was hard, because after I said no, she went into the hut, and she come out and she was wearing a towel. It's hard for me, like, I think the hardest thing about me saying no to me in that moment was that, I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, but when I'm single and young, I don't get to fuck a lot. Like, sexual opportunities for me are like sick days at work. I get about 10 of them a year. Anything above that's going to cost me 100 quid. But so we're finished at the hut, and we're driving back, and it's silent the whole way. And just before we get to my house, she says the weirdest thing of the whole time. And she says, Anthony, if this is the last time I see you, I want you to know that I wanted to show you that earlier, but I didn't know whether you would fit in the hut. And I was like, hold on a second, mate, how did you figure that one out? And she said, oh, that was easy. I measured you when you were sleeping. If I'd known that, biggest red flag of them all, right? Fucking Disney. There are some things that love just cannot overcome, and we can't feel guilty about that, and it's not a failure to leave a bad relationship, right? And I wish I'd learnt that earlier, because the other role model that I'd had growing up as a kid were my grandparents, right? My grandparents have been married for 60 years. And they've got the kind of love that you can only get from being married for 60 years. They have the kind of love where they can argue in a hospital, even when one of them is the patient. At Easter last year, we'd been drinking, and my grandfather started choking, and we had to go to the hospital to get tests, and he had to get some blood tests, and he put his hand on the nurse's arm and he said, please, take all the blood you want, but leave the beer in there. And my grandmother was like, Luke, shut up and let them do their job. And he was like, how are you yelling at me? I'm in a hospital nearly dead. And she was like, yeah, but you're embarrassing all of us. Just sit down and die quietly. And we were all so tense. The nurses and us were looking at each other and nobody knew what to do. And then my grandparents just started laughing. Because they've been arguing for so long. That is fun for them now. But that's not the best thing we do in the world. That is fucking Stockholm Syndrome. At the time I got that letter, I was dating a girl, right? And the way I had met her was I was at a bar, and she come over and she asked me if I would like a drink, right? And I was like, yes. And then she laughed, and then I laughed, and then a third person behind us laughed. And then I looked, and she had not asked me at all. Her friend was waiting there. And so I left embarrassed, and later, she found me on the dance floor with a beer, and she come over and she held out her hand and she said, you said yes, didn't you? And that was my Disney moment, right? And then we had 4 really happy years together. We dated for 10. We just spread them out. And people like ask, like I often wonder, like, how did I end up in that relationship for so long? And the truth is 2 things. Like, at the time that I met her, all my friends were getting into relationships. It was really hard to make time for people, and I don't like being alone. And so, like, there were red flags there. Like, she got angry at the tiniest detail. She had this sort of calendar that was mapped out 5 years in advance. Like, she knew that in 2023 she was getting married on March the 28th. But she was single when I met her. And she was often unpleasant to everybody I knew and loved. She didn't know how to communicate to them. So, but on the other hand, she had the most amazing availability. Like, she was shit to be around, but fuck me, she could do that a lot. The other thing, as the relationship grew and you grow into habits and you take bits of the other person and they take bits of you. And by the end of it, I just saw it as if I was outsourcing all of my self-loathing to her. Like I always knew somebody could hate me better than me. It just took me a while to meet her. The moment that I knew that it couldn't keep going on was this, right? We were driving to a party and she stopped and she turned to me and she said, Anthony, I think we should do the guilt-free 3. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's where 2 people in a relationship choose 3 celebrities that if they ever had the opportunity to, they could sleep with without guilt. It's in the name, right? And so she says that to me. And what I love about the guilt-free 3 is that it is 2 people who are claiming to love each other, deciding that what they will do for a little bit of fun is look each other in the eye and admit that they both wish they could do better. So she says that to me, and I'm so excited, I'm so dumb, I'm just like, Jennifer Lawrence, Rihanna, Natalie Portman, boom. And then in my head, I'm just imagining ways that I can meet these women and have them reject me. So much so that I didn't notice the wry smile pop up over her face. And she's like, okay, now it's my turn. I'm like, cool, who are your 3? And she was like, Jared Rebecca from Neighbours, Dr. Carl Cox from Neighbours, and Matthew Kennedy from Neighbours. And the thing that pissed me off about that the most is I was driving to drop her off at a party that was a VIP meet and greet with the cast of Neighbours! Like, what am I going to do at this point? No matter what happens, I'm definitely getting a text message at 3 a.m. like, going home with the toadfish, good luck with Jennifer Lawrence, dumb cunt! You know, I'm driving to the rest of the party, like I'm just sitting there driving, and then we get to the Crown Hotel where the party is happening, and she opens the door, and then she looks back and she smiles and she goes, I think we should shake on this, which felt like a trick. And I was like, oh yes, but I want to change my 3, right? And she is like, oh, it's just a bit of fun. Who are the lucky ladies? And I still hadn't worked it out, so I just went out with this, and I was so proud of it. It was like, our 3 sluttiest actual neighbours? I think I win. The problem with that story is that the funniest bit happens in the middle, which comedically, not a great look. Behind the 4th wall. But so, I'm in that relationship, I'm going through everything that had happened in the letter, and I'm planning to move to London, right? And then eventually, my now ex-girlfriend at dinner sat me down and she said, Anthony, we're not going to London. And I was like, we're what? And she said, we're not going to London, it's a bad idea, what are we going to do? And I was like, no, I was so glad that I'd got the letter, because it reminded me that I needed to make choices and I needed to be conscious about where I actually was heading in my life. And so I was like, no, I'm going to London, you can stay if you'd like. And she said, well, you can, but just know that if you do, you're going to come back 32, single, starting again, and alone. And I hadn't thought of it like that, if I'm honest, like, fair play. I told you she was good at self-loathing on my behalf. And I was there, and I was going through everything that had happened recently, and I was like, do you know what, no, I'm sticking to this. And so I did, I left, and I came to London. And then, in December last year, I was scrolling through Facebook, and in between a post from the old sexy teen girl brand that I used to work for, and an ad for Booking.com telling me it had been a while since I'd bought a 5-star hotel room. was a post from fucking Kevin. And he said, I'm visiting London, does anybody want to catch up? And I was like, dude, yes, like, it's Christmas time, I'm homesick, I could use a friend. And we sat down and he was like, dude, like, we never really got to talk about the fact that you just left your job and broke up with a girl you'd been with for 10 years and kind of just moved. Like, how did you not doubt that when she told you not to go? And I remember thinking, like, it was the letter. It was having to have thought about that stuff. And that made me feel really good. And so what I decided to do after I caught up with Kevin is to go home and write a letter back to myself at 60. And here's that letter. Hey mate, a lot more casual this time. In your early 20s, you really threw yourself a curveball with one of these things, and hopefully now you're doing better because of it. But just in case you're not, here's a reminder of the 3 things you think are important in life. You should try and help people, but you can't do that unless you've taken responsibility for helping yourself. 2, you should respect people's choices, but it's more important to make a choice you believe in than to go along with something else because it's easy. And 3, love is the most important thing that we do, but again, that has to start with you. I hope this finds you well. P.S. You're now 60, so you can fight for equality. You're going to die soon anyway. Also, if you match with a girl, redhead named Nikki on Tinder, don't go, remember the bunker. Thank you guys.